When I was 12, I went camping with my mom, my brother, and some family friends. We always went to the same remote spot every summer and set up tents around a fire pit. It was pretty low-key camping, nothing fancy. One night, all of us kids decided to share a tent and stay up late, talking and goofing around. Then, one of the kids suddenly whispered to me that he heard something outside. At first, we all brushed it off, but then we heard it too. A rustling sound that seemed to be getting closer. We all crept out of the tent one by one, shining our flashlights around. But there was nothing there. We heard the noise a few more times, but each time we looked, there was nothing to see. I thought I saw something shiny out of the corner of my eye, but it disappeared too quickly for me to be sure. After a while, we just went back to the tent, but none of us could sleep. We all felt like we were being watched, and we kept sticks nearby, just in case. The next morning, we were packing up to leave, when my mom realized that she couldn't find the glass jar she brought to hold our toothbrushes. We searched all over, but we couldn't find it. It was kind of annoying, but we didn't think much of it. As we were packing up the tents, one of the guys suddenly froze. I pushed him aside so I could see what was going on, and I was shocked at what I saw. There was a squirrel skin completely removed from the body, hanging from a tree, and right next to it was my mom's jar, filled with the insides of the squirrel. We all freaked out and ran back to our parents, completely traumatized. We packed up as quickly as we could and never went back to that camping spot again. Even years later, I still can't shake that feeling of being watched, and the memory of that gruesome sight hanging from the tree. My family was always the outdoorsy type. We loved nature, hiking, and exploring. My dad would always say that the great outdoors will teach you more about life than any smartphone or computer would, and I couldn't agree more. Anyway, every year, my family and I took an annual camping trip up in the mountains, and this year it was no different. We were excited to head out to the woods for our little getaway. When we parked our truck, I was happy to see that the grounds were completely empty. The last couple of years, it was a little too crowded for me to really enjoy it. We quickly unloaded our gear and started to pitch our tents. By the time we finished setting everything up, it was nearly sundown. My dad made a fire, and we cooked hot dogs for dinner. We sat around the fire telling stories and enjoying the beauty of the night sky. Soon it was time for bed. I crawled into my tent, which was right next to my parents'. It wasn't hard for me to fall asleep, despite the occasional rustling of the leaves and howls of distant animals. The sounds of nature all around me soothed me in my comfy sleeping bag. But then, I woke up to a noise. I checked my phone, and it was 3:15 in the morning. I heard footsteps coming from my parents' tent, and figured it was just my dad going to the bathroom. I was about to try and fall back asleep, when the zipper to my tent started to unzip. It came down about 5 inches. All I could see was the black night outside, nothing else. I sat there nervously, wondering why my dad or mom was trying to get into my tent. That's when an old lady's head popped in. Her skin was gray, her hair was thin and wild, her eyes looked unhinged.
"Will you come play with me?"
she asked, her voice sounding strangely childlike. I was terrified. I couldn't move or speak. The old lady tilted her head.
"Come with me. I have something to show you."
I literally froze like a statue. I could not comprehend my circumstances. After a moment, I just shook my head no. The old lady smiled and then left. It took me about an hour before I could regain my thought process. I went to my parents' tent and explained what happened. My dad thought I had a bad dream, but that's when we saw bare footprints leading to my tent and then into the woods. My parents believed me, and we quickly packed everything up into the truck and left. It was a 5-hour drive home, and we were all exhausted. But as soon as we arrived, my mom received a notification on her phone from the campgrounds. The local authorities said that there was a mental institution 5 miles from the grounds, and that 10 patients had escaped. My mind flashed back to the old lady asking me to play with her. It was a terrifying experience, one that still haunts me to this day. I'm an adult now, with my own family, but every so often, I'll get this feeling that the old lady will return and ask me to play with her. It's totally illogical, I know, but I don't think I'll ever fully recover from it. Nonetheless, my love for the outdoors still persists, and I still go hiking and camping with my family. But now, I'm much more cautious and always make sure to check the local news for any escaped mental patients before heading out on our trips. Growing up, my friend and I were always on the lookout for adventures. Living in a small town, there weren't many exciting things to do, but we always managed to find something to keep us entertained. One thing we loved doing was exploring the forest that was located just opposite of my friend's house. It was a huge forest, and as kids we found it both scary and thrilling. We loved nothing more than sneaking out of my friend's house at night to roam around the forest. With our flashlights, food, and blankets, we had a routine when we went out for our night adventures. We made sure to stay awake and explore the forest for a few hours before heading back home. But one night, we ended up falling asleep in our house before we got a chance to go exploring the forest. When my friend woke me up suddenly, it was already past 3 a.m., much later than we usually stayed out. We grabbed our essentials and crept out of the back door into the cold and dark night. The forest crushed under our feet as we crossed the deserted road, and as we reached the entrance to the forest, we noticed how pitch black and completely silent it was. We turned on our flashlights and stepped onto the uneven path into the forest. As we made our way through the forest, we finally reached the small hut we had constructed one afternoon. It was made entirely of sticks, purely for the purpose of having some shelter for our campouts. But there were times when vandals or other kids had damaged our hut, but for the most part it stayed intact. However, on this occasion, we found that it was completely destroyed. It was then that we heard it. A loud shrieking giggle that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. My friend and I jumped in shock and looked at each other like, what the hell was that? We were completely freaked out. The eerie and unnatural giggle rang out again, contradicting the silence and making my body break out into goosebumps.
Something is in here.
My friend whispered to me, looking utterly terrified.
We have to go. Now.
Her voice of rationale made it even more scary and unnerving for me, knowing that someone was in the forest with us at 3 o'clock in the morning. We just looked at each other in disbelief and took off running in unison. Our footsteps navigated the path as naturally as we could from muscle memory, our uneven gasps of air punctuating the giggling that seemed to be following us, getting closer and closer. The light from our flashlights went up and down with our fast movements, illuminating random patches of trees and bushes, as we finally saw a small silver of light as we came to the forest entrance. Running out of the forest, we didn't stop until we reached the back door of my friend's house, and almost collapsed with a sigh of relief to be safe. Then my friend's eyes went wide, and she nudged me, pointing a shaky finger across the road. A creepy woman of unknown age was standing at the forest entrance, giggling that awful, horrifying giggle, and waving over at us. We screamed and ran inside and looked out of my friend's bedroom window through the smallest gap in the curtain, and could still see the woman standing there. Worse yet, she was staring right at us, as if she knew we were there. We could tell she was still giggling that hideous, appalling laugh. She turned very slowly and walked back into that forest. We were both trembling as we sat huddled on my friend's bed, trying to catch our breath and make sense of what had just happened. The woman's eerie laughter echoed in our minds, making it hard to think clearly. We couldn't help but wonder who she was and what she was doing out in the forest at that time of night. As we tried to calm down, my friend and I started discussing what we should do next. We both agreed that we needed to tell someone about what happened, but we were too scared to tell our parents. So me and my friend decided that we should keep this a secret, and we should avoid going out at night for a while, until we felt safer. Soon after, we saw something on the news about the strange woman. They said that the woman was homeless, who had been living in the forest for months. She had a history of mental illness and had been known to act erratically. We were shocked to hear about her situation, but we also felt a sense of relief, knowing that she wasn't a danger to us. While we couldn't explain the woman's laughter that haunted us, we felt grateful that we had come out of the situation unharmed. This happened a couple years ago, when I was still with my ex-girlfriend. My girlfriend at the time wanted to surprise me with what she said was an overnight surprise trip. I obliged and felt like I was a pretty lucky guy for her to do something that required that much planning. After packing a duffel bag full of clothes and toiletries, we left for what I thought was a resort or some kind of hotel stay. 2.5 hours passed when we pulled off of a main road and headed down an off-road path. I asked her if this was a camping trip, and she replied yes. To be honest, I was disappointed, as I didn't really like camping. Not to mention, I wish I knew to pack my hiking shoes. I didn't complain, of course, because it was still a romantic gesture. 15 minutes on this rough road, we finally pulled into a camping ground. The first thing I noticed was that there really wasn't anyone around us. It made sense though, this was really far off the beaten path. I was actually surprised her car made it that far out considering how harsh the road was. Anyway, we make a fire pit and she cooks dinner. Everything's going just fine and we're really feeling each other. We of course take her to the tent as the sun goes down and we're vibing off each other. Yeah, it's what you would expect would happen as we begin moving things along as young college age kids do. This is where the first strange occurrence happens. I hear scratching noises on the side of the tent. I try to remember if we set the tent up next to it like a brush or something. But maybe the wind is causing branches to rustle against the tent? Oh well, that's the woods. Maybe it's a bird or something else. It stops rustling and we continue chilling as if nothing happened. Then things escalate in a strange manner. It's like the wind stopped and the environment became silent. We both felt uneasy, causing us to sort of get knocked out of our playful mood. She laid next to me as if we tried to concentrate on listening to hear if there was a bear or some other animal in the area. Then it happened in an instant. Something like an explosion hit the tent tremendously hard, and I could compare it to say if a log was thrown like a battering ram against the side of the tent. I say this because it literally pushed the material in forcefully and felt dangerous. A surge of adrenaline lit through my body as I felt like something violent was outside the tent. I never knew if I was a fight or flight guy, but I guess my next action gives me some idea. I yell aloud,
"Give me the knife and flashlight."
as I scramble up and unzip the tent with tools in hand. My first thought was that I was going to confront some psycho that was messing with us, perhaps with a baseball bat or some kind of battering weapon. I kid you not, I launched myself out of the tent and stood up in a flurry to confront my attacker. A few breaths pass as a cold feeling sets in. I do a 360 scan to nothing but silence and darkness. Maybe it was a branch that fell on the tent, but there was absolutely nothing on the ground where the thud was heard and felt.
"Hello?"
I yelled again, and again to no response, until only a moment later in the silence, a chill shot up my spine.
"Get the keys and get out of the tent."
I said in a frantic tone as my girlfriend listened and now joined me. I looked at her car that we arrived in and noticed it was about 30 yards out of this shoddy off-road path. She didn't even need to know what I was thinking as we both just started to speed walk towards it. You might be thinking at this point that I'm overreacting, but truly, I cannot describe the terror that washed over me when I looked out into the darkness after investigating the tent. I could feel like something was watching me, and to top it off, it was eerily silent. I know she confirmed my suspicions when she started for the car immediately, without question. Our instincts were telling us to get the hell out of there. The walk to the car was unnerving and felt like a football field away, but finally, we got into the car with keys in hand, and I took the driver's seat. After turning the keys, it led to some relief as the engine started. Instinctively, I locked the doors and turned the headlights on. We sat for about 3 seconds trying to rationalize what was happening when my girlfriend started exclaiming,
"My laptop is moving. Something is in the tent."
She said this because she brought her laptop to serve as a lantern after dark. We of course left it in a hurry as well as other items. I saw what she saw. It was items being rustled around 30 yards away. Without further hesitation, I put the car in gear and started down the rough road. As I tried to calmly drive the car down the dirt patch quickly but carefully, the strangest thing happened next. A loud piercing ringing noise rang from inside the car's cabin. I turned the radio on and off. I checked the windows. I asked my girlfriend if her car had ever made such a noise. She replied no. I asked her again if she could hear it, as maybe it was just me being under stress, and she said,
"Yes, I hear it too. I don't know what that is."
in a confused, panicked tone. Now I wanted to write this off as a car problem, but if you were in there with me, you would describe it as some kind of bell continuously ringing. Like it didn't sound like any car noise I had ever heard. My next instinct, as I grew up as a pastor's kid, I remember just praying for 10 minutes as I was convinced it was a supernatural or demonic event. We endured the screech for 10 grueling minutes, as to my relief it ended suddenly. It didn't fade out or go quiet. The loud ring literally stopped in an instant. I can't describe the feeling in that car when it stopped. It is so strange to look back and remember that I felt internally that the ordeal was over once the ring stopped. Everything felt normal again. The panic, the chills, all of that went away in an instant. We ended up down the road another 45 minutes and finally stopped at a trucker's diner. We slept in the parking lot, or at least she did, as I was still on edge from the adrenaline dump. In attempted bravery, the next day, we went back to the camping site as the sun was up. We investigated but saw no tracks or anything except for the contents of the tent tossed around but still accounted for. I was hoping they were missing so I could write it off as some people screwing with us and plundering our tent. That didn't seem to be the case. We were packed up and gone in less than 10 minutes as the area still felt weird. I haven't been camping since. I would go again, but next time I want an RV or at least a relatively known location with others around.